Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Chai After Dark. Today, we have a very special guest. We are beyond excited for Usman Riaz to join us, director of the first feature-length 2D animated film out of Pakistan called The Glassworker. He is also co-founder of Mono Animation Studios, based out of Karachi, Pakistan. Usman, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very, very much. And thank you for having me.
Great. So, first of all, I just wanted to say Shabnam and I watched The Glassworker. I watched it 2.5 times, and I was disappointed I didn't get through the third time, and I probably will today after this interview. But it's like forever perpetuated in my mind.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's just so, I just wanted to get into the accolades as soon as possible because it has penetrated my brain. I'm Pakistani by descent, American born and raised. But when I used to go to Pakistan as a child, it reminds me of just so many of my stories, of my aunt, of my grandparents. And there's nothing specific that I would say that ties it in. It's just the entire vibe that you
Yeah.
created in this film is absolutely amazing. And I thank you so much for creating it.
Yeah. It's,
thank
oh,
you.
I was just going to also say that, it's something that us as Pakistani Americans can be proud of as well. And that's a gift that you've given, I think, everybody from, within the country itself and the diaspora as well.
That means a lot. I'm so grateful that the film resonated with you. And yeah, it means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. I know this journey is out on Instagram, and of course, a lot of our listeners have understood that this took you quite a gargantuan effort to create this film. Talk a little bit about what went into those 10 years. I know there's a documentary out there for the folks who want to see the full struggles and success of creating the movie The Glassworker. But Usman, in your own words, for our listeners that are interested in the creative field, what sort of advice even can you give, a small spiel about what mindset goes into creating something like this, especially over a decade-long period?
Yeah, it took a very, very long time to realize this dream. And again, I'm just so grateful that I got to make this movie and make it on the terms that I wanted to make it. And it's a miracle being able to make one movie. So I hope and pray that if I get the opportunity to make another one, I will take all the experiences that I gathered from making this and do the next one even better. But the main thing that I held on to throughout these 10 years, I'd been working on the idea for the film even before these 10 years, but the actual, I would say, sitting down and actively working on it, what got me through was the belief that we could do it. Um, and I think that is the one thing that I held on to throughout the entire production, and despite how difficult it got, because it no one had ever done anything like this in Pakistan before.
Yeah.
But a lot of people who were coming up to me saying they were saying there's a reason nobody's done it because it's impossible. And the only way I kept thinking about it was no one has ever done it yet, but we can do it if there's a desire to get it done. Then it will get done. Did I think it would take 10 years? Absolutely not. I thought it would take maximum 6 years. In the 7th year of production, I was sitting with my head in my hands going, oh my God, this is not even close to being completed. What is going on? But persistence, stubbornness, and delusion is what I held on to, that this could get. And yeah, I never imagined that it would be having the impact that it has had. Supremely grateful for that. And I got to work with a remarkable team in Pakistan and a remarkable team internationally to bring this vision to everyone. And a lot of persistence and stubbornness is what I would say to anybody who would like to embark on something like this. I don't recommend it, but your stubbornness and delusion is what will get you through.
That's interesting advice. Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to ask you, like, what would you advise people? But I guess that's some interesting advice.
It's the truth. It's the
Yeah.
truth. How I got through it. People like Steve Jobs said this. He said it takes years of work to be an overnight success.
Mhm.
So much work went into it, days and nights of just actively working on this. Um, it felt impossible a lot of the times, but every day a little bit was accomplished, and then we'd move on to the next step and the next step and the next step. And eventually it got done. I would also say one more thing, which is faith. Faith really got
Mhm.
me through this entire
Yeah.
production. Just utter belief in what I'm doing and uh in God, basically,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
put me on this path. Please just help me see it through.
Right. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Sometimes delusion is necessary to disrupt. And Shabnam and I grew up in the Silicon Valley, as we touched on in our intro with you before we started recording. And I actually on the advertising side, so I've worked with a lot of creatives. And you're totally correct. Like what they wanted to do was always a disruption. In order to create something, you had to get super uncomfortable. And the belief that a lot of these people have when they start their potential startup, tech startup, or in your case, an animated film that's never been done before, it requires so much persistence. I'm going to be very honest with the audience. I don't have that sort of a drive, I believe. I'm curious, like, have you always been like this as a child? And we know that you have a very extensive music background and you're a classically trained pianist as well. So growing up, was this always forefront in your mind, the creative aspect of your brain? And the reason why I'm asking is you also touch on this in the documentary where, yes, if you're not an engineer, doctor, dentist, then you might get a few looks in our
Yeah.
community. How was your childhood growing up? Were you thrown into the arts? You were able to express creative freedom?
You're absolutely right. And I would say that I'm very, very grateful that my family has never made me feel the way you just described, where a lot of people in our community look down upon the creative fields and creative expression. Um, I've been drawing since I could hold a pencil, and I'd been playing music since I was 5 years old. So my mother's side, they're all artists. My mother's an artist. My aunt is a fine artist, and my drawing and passion for art came from them. And I would say from my father's side, there are a lot of musicians and actors and directors and a lot of other things in my father's family. Zia Moyuddin is my father's mother's brother, essentially. I
Oh,
called
wow.
him.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
Grew up around a lot of just access to these things, but also my father was a theater actor himself, so I grew up backstage while he would be preparing for his performances, and they had a whole theater group that they would be doing all of these plays for. And my father acted in a few TV shows as well before he set that aside and said, I want to focus just entirely on the business right now. I'm grateful he did that, because him and his brothers, the work that they did allowed me to get to a point where I could think about animation and doing it in Pakistan. So I would say I grew up around a lot of creativity. My grandmother wrote a lot of music, and she would do a lot of these performances. There would be a lot of mehfils at home where people would come together, share poetry, share compositions they've written, things like that. So it was never odd for me to be doing these things. But I found out when I was exposed to wider society that the things I'm doing is strange, for exactly the reason that you said. But I never let that get to me. I'm a very
Yeah.
insular person. Uh, I enjoy practicing. I enjoy working at my craft. So I would just filter all that noise out and then just do what I'm doing. So it was never an issue, but I understand where your question was coming from, because it is difficult to do what we have done. Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the business part of it as well, right? Because you're not only a brilliant creative person, but you guys started the studio, you've done all the business aspects of this, things that in normal situations people are able to outsource to other people and other companies. You guys have done all of that. So I'm sure that obviously had to take some of your energy away from the creative side. And so how did you balance that, and how did you accomplish all that?
I never saw the business side of what we're doing as a hindrance because my focus was always on the film. Everything that we did for the studio, everything that we established at the studio was with this one primary goal in mind, that this movie has to get made. So all the decisions that were taken, I'm very grateful to have worked with, like my wife, Mariam, she's the co-founder of the
Mhm.
studio, an art director on the project. My cousin Khizr is a partner at the studio and producer on the film. So every decision was taken to allow us to make this movie. A lot of people came up to us while we were in production saying, why don't you do this for a little while? Why don't you do this outsourcing project? And I would always say, no, we have to make this movie. We were built, I made this studio to make this movie. And I think that North Star really helped. And I'm very, very
Yeah.
grateful that we were, again, I'm just going to be expressing a lot of gratitude because
Yeah.
looking back on this 10-year journey, there could have been a lot of instances where we weren't able to work on it, where we encountered some sort of issue. I mean, when I was doing the film, it felt like it was never ending and it felt like a blessing and a burden, but it could have been so much worse. So, just a lot of gratitude there that I was able to maintain that focus and make the movie and work with people who believed in that vision and who were kind of on this adventure with me. And I would say keeping that North Star, it allowed everything else to fall into place. There's this wonderful quote by Jeff Bezos. He said, uh, focus on your vision, but be flexible on how you get there. And I, without knowing it, followed that exactly, where if things didn't perfectly align with how I saw the movie would get made, but it's still allowed for the movie to be made. And if you're tweaking and changing things here and there, at the end of the day, you're still working towards finishing the movie. So that's primarily what my main focus was. That's what I wanted to get done. I wanted to make this film to prove something to myself, yes, but also to showcase that we can do something like this if we come together. There's so much talent in Pakistan, so many creative
Mhm.
people. If we all come together under this banner to follow this vision, we'll be able to achieve it. And like I
Yeah.
said, 7 years in, I felt like that would never happen. So we're sitting here now with the finished movie, and yeah,
Yeah.
maintaining focus is important.
Of
That's
course.
amazing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this one of the central things that you've mentioned in this conversation, and we also see it in the documentary as well, is the importance of Pakistan and doing this in Pakistan and in Karachi for you. So tell us a little bit about that, because I think a lot of people may just say like, hey, you could have gone somewhere else and done this there and maybe had more local infrastructure that already could support you and things like that. So talk to us about sort of the importance of why you wanted to do it there.
I think it's important to also position the movie in a unique way. And that
Mhm.
was thinking early on that if we make this film the way other people in the industry make their movies, which is they outsource a lot of work to animation hubs and then the films get made, that wouldn't be a story. That wouldn't be interesting. I think a lot of uniqueness behind this project is also the way it was made.
Yeah.
Um, and I knew that that would be something that would pique people's interest. So
Yeah.
it was important to support the talent in Pakistan, give them a project to rally behind to make something like this. Because I mean, I storyboarded the whole film, but there's no way I can make the entire movie myself. You need a group of people
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
come together and make this. So there's, again, like I said, there's so much talent in Pakistan. Bringing that talent together to make this, building a narrative about how we're making the movie, all of these things were things that I thought when I first embarked on the journey. And of course, I did in the first few months go to Japan, go to all these other places to try and figure out how we could make it. But all signs were pointing towards make this in Pakistan because that is where you'll be able to achieve something that is narratively around the film, different than how other people do it. So that
Mhm.
was something I was very cognizant of early on.
Mhm.
And it was all an idea till it was done. Then once the movie was finished, then I could turn around and say, yeah, I did do that.
Yeah.
But it all, like I said, could have fallen apart at any moment. So A lot of gratitude there, as I've been saying throughout this.
Yeah.
But that was important to me. I wanted to make it in Pakistan to also have that added edge that we did do it in Pakistan, where no one has ever done something like this before.
Yeah, I could see that. I know we talked about growing up in the United States, but for some reason I went to third grade in Pakistan in Faisalabad. And all of our learnings and teachings were based around STEM, math, history, writing, reading, of course. I don't remember anything creative. And we went to a pretty top school, I guess. This was in 1989 or something. So it was quite a while ago. But you're totally correct. I didn't see a lot of creative ambition. I know it's a small sample size and I don't have the full repertoire of schools in Punjab, but I talked to my daughter about this. She's going to be 16. And I showed her I was like, you have to watch Glassworker with me. You are going to watch this documentary once she wakes up. It's a little early here. And it's just so important for me to introduce her to people that are ambitious, such as yourself. And Usman, you're not just ambitious. Like, you brought all these
Yeah.
people that were former dentists and doctors in the documentary. They became animators. You gave people careers and focus that they might not have found that passion. And so again, I want to commend you for bringing people together. And Steve Jobs has quotes on this too, like in terms of motivating people, it's separate from the business side. It's separate from the actual creative side. So the team that you built and the colleagues that you've probably made for life, I would assume a lot of these guys and people that you work with, it's truly inspiring.
Yeah.
Shabnam and I work together on a one-on-one basis, and sometimes that's difficult. So to bring all these people together in Pakistan and create this film with the passion that you had is just truly inspiring. The teamwork, particularly, I wanted to call out.
Thank you so much. No, absolutely. I'm very grateful that we were able to find the right people to be able to work on this project. And there's so much talent in Pakistan that just doesn't get a platform to showcase it.
Mhm.
I'm grateful that we were able to give some of those people a platform to showcase their talents, and everybody worked incredibly hard. And I will always be grateful for that.
Great. I know
So
Shabnam has some specific questions about the film because
Yeah.
it's I understand it's I don't want to say intentionally vague. I don't want to put any like thoughts. I want you to speak about your own film, but Shabnam has some we talked about the film for quite a while. Like, I would
Yeah.
say like 2-3 hours. We've talked about the film. We're trying to figure out some of these aspects of it. Truly like awe-inspiring how it kind of like maintains in your brain after you
Yeah.
watch it. Go ahead, Shabnam. Sorry.
Yeah, no. Before we get into the meat of the story, I also wanted to ask you, in the documentary, it came up how you initially did the film in English and then you wanted to do the Urdu version as well. So I'm just wondering, did you feel that it was limiting to try to get the feelings, the emotions of the movie across in any particular language? And I don't know, do you have a preference for the Urdu or the English version?
I actually love both versions because I actively worked on both of them. But the actual story behind the language selection was the film always started off as an Urdu movie. I even titled it Shisha Ghar. I had to change the title later because of marketing and just keep it consistent. I would have loved to have those two different titles. But I started it as an Urdu project. The Kickstarter was also in Urdu, and the first few drafts of the script were in Urdu. But then when all of the international talent started coming on board, we had to pivot to English so that everybody could understand what was going on.
Yeah.
And then once all of that was done, I came back to the Urdu version and we finished it. So it started off as an Urdu project. The idea was that I wanted to have just an Urdu animated film and see what we can do with it. And we're very grateful that we got to record a wonderful English version of the movie with actors like Art Malik and Sasha Dhawan and Anjali Mohindra. The phenomenal job. The Urdu version is what the original film was supposed to be. It's just that because of all the production issues and things that were going on, we had to pivot to English for a bit, and then we came back to the Urdu.
Interesting. So it must have been a process to kind of convey the same feelings in both language, the same sentiment as well, right?
Definitely, because there's certain things you can say in Urdu that you can't really say in English. Um, so I approached the two versions as two separate versions of the movie with obviously some similarities, but with Urdu you could say different things. With the English you could say different things. So I, I mean, in the dubbing world, it's called a localization as opposed to a translation. We didn't actively do any translation work. It was more just localizing the content. So, do I have a preference for each version? I like both for separate reasons. I enjoy the Urdu version because of the novelty of it. That
Yeah.
um, but at the end of the day, the story is what matters the most, and the language that you watch it in is just the version that hopefully means you're not reading subtitles and missing out those 10 years of work that you're
Yeah.
seeing on screen. So I don't really have a preference, but I do
Yeah.
enjoy the version.
Very
The
cool.
the Urdu version's a very easy watch, and our Urdu is
Not great.
it's quite limited,
Yeah.
but it was an easy watch. I didn't have any issues following along. Um, Shabnam, I made this comment to you and Usman, talking about localization. The "I love you" in English versus
Oh
the "मैं
yeah.
तुमसे मोहब्बत करता हूँ," or that's something that I have never heard in like Pakistani dramas in the past. I don't know how taboo those sort of concepts are in Pakistan today, but it's kind of a lot, right? To walk up to somebody and say, "मैं तुमसे मोहब्बत करता हूँ." I don't know if that's a thing, and I'm just asking very like,
It's
as
so much
more,
more
yeah,
it's so much more intense than
yeah,
the English "I love you," right? I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Definitely. And it's not something people say to each other.
Mhm.
That's why it was written in a letter. And of course, she's narrating the letter. But I felt that it seemed more natural in the written text. But yeah, people don't talk like that to each other. So that is something that we actively discussed. And
Interesting.
like in Bollywood films, they use the word pyar a lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
मैं तुमसे प्यार करता हूँ या करती हूँ, which we felt wasn't as strong as the feeling that we were trying to convey. So we
Yeah.
went with the word muhabbat because
Yeah.
that's such a stronger, more evocative word, and also doesn't sound like it's a Bollywood dialogue. So yeah, we wanted to try and do something unique there, and having it be in a letter made it seem more natural. But yeah, people wouldn't go up to each other and say "Mob- mob goose face." Yeah, nobody would say that. So yeah,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. That's a great observation.
Yeah.
I wanted to make a quick note here. Your wife, Miriam, also animation director, co-founder of Mono Studios, she is doing the dubbing in Urdu for Alliz, correct? Yeah, I just
Yes.
wanted listeners to know that this is a multi-pronged effect by the team here, not just the animation, but also the dubbing. And of course, Shabnam, we haven't even gone to the music yet, which I know
Yeah.
we will. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd like to now jump into the actual film. There's so many great scenes, but one of the notable ones that I wanted to highlight is the one where Vincent and Alliz are like running through the park and they're chasing the butterflies, and then they lay down on the grass and they see the military planes flying overhead, and they have completely different reactions. So that was such a emotive scene, and I noticed that your film brings in a lot of the nature. So if you could talk about that scene in particular and how the nature played a role there, but also highlighting their differences in that moment.
I'm so glad you enjoyed that sequence. I really enjoyed storyboarding it. Um, I don't like a lot of exposition dumps for the audience. I wanted to do everything visually and showcase all of these things visually and impart that feeling to the viewers. So that scene was very, very important to show that their youthful innocence is now going to go away because the war is intensifying and their differences are coming up. When they were children, they didn't worry about it as much. And then when they started getting older, they started to see just how different they are. But their affection for each other and their affection for the arts, whether it's music or craftsmanship, that's ultimately what kept bringing them back together. But they come from different worlds. And that scene was important to showcase that one child who has grown up with a father who's a colonel,
Yeah.
where the military and all those things are not something which is to look, not to look down upon, but something to be fearful of. So showcasing that for Aliz's character, while also Vincent, who has grown up in an environment where his father is a staunch pacifist and doesn't believe in any of these things. That's when they both realize just how different they are, and that quickly starts affecting their relationship as the story progresses. So it was important to show that to the audience, and I felt that scene did more than any words of dialogue ever
Yeah.
could, and showcased their differences to them and to the audience. So that's what I tried to do there.
Yeah, it was interesting because we talked about, did we get emotional? Did we cry during the movie? Right. And one of the things that I said is I didn't cry because every time I was very sad, I was also very mad, right? It feels that the world is conspiring against these two, and they're kind of, you almost feel from that scene, they're like doomed from the start. And so there's equal amounts of, I guess, sadness, deep sadness, and also deep sort of anger in that. Is that was that your goal?
It definitely was a goal. Uh, there's this wonderful concept in Urdu poetry, which is the concept of the unattainable beloved, whether that's a person or whether that's the poet talking to God. The fact that you can never reach them, but that yearning for them,
Mm.
that
Mhm.
really makes a relationship interesting. And if those two ended up together, then A, that we wouldn't have a movie, but B, the relationship dynamic and what they go through wouldn't be interesting and wouldn't encourage the viewer to keep watching to see what happens. And that constant feeling of, but will they end up together? Will they get there happily ever after? What is going to happen to their friendship, or what could be their relationship? I wanted to capture that yearning and that feeling in the film. Apart from all of the larger than life things that the characters are going through, ultimately it's just a story about relationships. It's a story about these two, Vincent and Elise, and it's the story about their relationship with their fathers and how ultimately nobody's wrong, nobody's right. You just have to figure out your own path forward. So that was very, very intentional.
Yeah,
Interesting.
it comes across very thought provoking, as we said. And I'm glad you touched on the fathers, which we know is a very patriarchal society in Pakistan does exist. And the way Vincent's father is not forcing him, I would say, to be a glass worker, but Vincent obviously wants his dad to be very proud of him. The mother isn't in the film. And then Elise has the same back and forth with her dad. Like, I am enriched by the spoils of war, but something here doesn't feel right. And how do I go against my father? And that's just something that's another diaspora talking point. How do
Yeah.
we go against our fathers sometimes? So the way you do it it's a very delicate balance. Like, I know there's not a lot of conflict specifically with them going back and forth, fathers and their son and daughter Elise, but the way that it's expressed is so visual, and it's thought provoking, and it honestly made me want to call my dad and be like, hey, like, we have some things to talk about. So yeah, it's just like the family aspect of it hits really hard as well. I don't know if that was expressive intentionally, but it does come through quite specifically.
No, I'm glad. And it was intentional for sure. I wanted to capture that delicate balance in a relationship with especially your fathers, but um again, I didn't want anybody to be an antagonist in the film. I didn't want that at all, because human beings aren't inherently
Mhm.
good or evil. We're just all finding our way throughout life. And that is something I wanted to try and showcase, that Vincent's father is not wrong in his worldview, but his views could lean into a little bit of the extreme, and how that affects his son. What are the consequences of that? And same for Elise and the relationship with her father, where, I mean, he's not a bad man, but
Yeah.
there's questionable things. but that doesn't make him a bad man. He's also just fulfilling his duty. How do you manage that? Where do you find the human being in all of that? Which is what
Mhm.
she does find through the film when he comes back from his traumatizing experience at the Battle of the Great Ravine, and she just puts her head on his knee when he's sitting there, and just accepting that this is my father. All of those things, I again very, very intentionally tried to capture, but of course, it can mean whatever the viewer wants it
Mhm.
to mean.
Interesting. So we talked about the dads, but another interesting character is Aliz's mom, right? So in some ways, she's like a stereotypical military wife who chooses to intentionally ignore like the negative aspects of war. Specifically, the scene where the colonel brings Alliz the new violin from his spoils of war. And when Alliz notices the person's name on it, her mother basically tells her not to pay any attention to that and that she should basically just enjoy the spoils of war. So, what was your inspiration for this character? Was it like an archetype?
It was definitely an archetype. And then also showing that she too is also human by after experiencing all the things that she experiences, and with the colonel dying, the whole arc that she goes through, she is the one who actually goes up to Elise and convinces her to go and complete her performance, because the person who told her to stop playing the violin because she has to go to bed is the person who told her to go on stage and make her proud and make her father proud. See, again, I wanted every character to have an arc and
Mhm.
to showcase that no one is inherently good or bad. Malik's character, for example, is the stereotypical bully archetype
Mm.
Yeah.
that becomes the hero that brings the colonel back and
Yeah.
shows such a selfless act. Whether he's motivated by love, whatever he's motivated by, the point is his actions spoke volumes. Those are the
Mhm.
things I wanted to do. A lot of subverting of expectations with these archetypes.
Yeah.
That's
That's
really
a
beautiful.
int super interesting, and we haven't touched on the gin yet, and it's not dark here, so maybe we can speak about it. I have learned in the past that in Pakistan when I went, like, you can talk about it during the day, but not in the evening. So here, gin is more expressed as, oh, someone like, I don't know, like more very casual. We're not scared of gins, I would say. But in Pakistan, when I went, it was very specific. My grandparents were straight up told me there's a gin in our house, and he's been living there since the 50s. So when I would go there, they would just like, don't look in this left corner. Sometimes he pops up, and Usman, I didn't sleep for like 2.5 months, right, in Pakistan. So I've told Shabnam this story, but for your inspiration, I think you touch on it within the documentary as well, that this is legacy, it's lore, and it's obviously religious aspect as well in Pakistan. But we weren't sure who and the jinn might be, or the jinn's true intentions. And I think, speaking with you throughout this episode, that must be somewhat intentional. I have my own theories, and I think Shabnam, you had a completely different theory, and that's how far apart we were on the jinn, on what it was representing within the film.
Yeah, at one point I was thinking maybe Elise was never real. Maybe like Elise was
Yeah.
a djinn all along.
So I can tell you what my interpretation is, but that spoils the fun. I mean, um, my favorite movies are the movies where I, the audience member, and am active participant in the story, where my version of the events that have taken place in the movie are canon, and no one can take that away from me because that is how I interpreted the story. I enjoy movies like that. So what I wanted to do with this is give, obviously the film has the standard three-part structure and narrative and what is going on, but then also um, the subtext in all of it can mean whatever you want it to mean. And I think that there's been a few instances where people have come up to me and told me how they interpreted the movie that is so much better than my interpretation of the movie, that I just say, yes, that is exactly what the story is. So I enjoy that aspect of it. And I wanted to showcase the jinn the way they are actually uh, I wouldn't say depicted, but the way they actually are described. And like you said, when you went back to Pakistan, the people just the offhandedly say, "There's a jinn living here, by the way. Have a good
Yeah.
night." Things
Yeah.
like um. So for Tomas and for Vincent, the jinn is a presence that is there, and I didn't want to paint it in a positive or a negative light. It's an unreliable narrator, and it kind of makes you think as to what is going on with this character and what the Jin's relationship with Vincent is. What is the Jin's relationship with Alliz? Is Alliz real? Is she not?
Mhm.
Um, so I think that just makes the story more interesting. And having that unreliable narrator as just a subtext throughout the story enriches the story and just makes it more interesting.
Yeah. So speaking of unreliable narrators, one of the discussions that we had was around Vincent himself. So I don't know if it was intentional, but this movie also feels that it comments a lot on mental health, right? So, is Vincent suffering from like PTSD or a manic episode, right? We had all these kinds of discussions when we were talking about the movie. So, for example, at the train station scene, when him and Elise are arguing, they had just, they'd just been bombed, right? And it was sort of the first time you see them also really kind of going at each other and being mean to each other, right? And so we were discussing, well, were they traumatized by these bombs? And is that why? Or is it just that this intense experience kind of allowed them to be more honest? What were your goals there, I guess?
So with the Jin aspect with Vincent, everything is told from his point of view. So we don't know whether what he's going through is actually demonic jinn possession that happens to him, or whether he's just traumatized by everything that's happening around him and this is him acting out. All of those things were very, very intentionally planted throughout the
Mhm.
story to, again, just make it out to be that is he truly okay? Um, and whether the entire war and all the experiences that he went through has that affected him in such a way that he's lost touch with reality. So everything that you're describing was an interesting bit of subtext that I did plan in the beginning when we would have our meetings with when we were finalizing the screenplay, all of those things. Because again, movies are interesting when there's lots of layers of subtext and many
Right.
interpretations can be can be taken out of it. And that's the kind of movies I enjoy. So I wanted to put these sort of things in the movie itself as well for people who enjoy movies to watch and dig a little deeper. You can watch the movie as a surface level film and hopefully enjoy it. But if you really, really enjoyed it, then you'll find a lot more fun stuff to kind of dig through as you watch it
Yeah.
multiple uh, because I feel like that when I watch the movies I enjoy, that they're rewarding me for taking an interest and noticing all the little Easter eggs and subtext that's planted throughout the film. So I did intentionally put all of those things in there, and
Mhm.
with his character specifically, you're meant to question whether he's lost touch with reality or not.
Right, right. Yeah, I just find that so fascinating because I think, in our culture, one of the things we don't talk about as much is mental health. And so just the fact that that's a possibility here and that, there's kind of this commentary on trauma, whether it be, the jinn or just his trauma of like losing his mom, the war, all these other things that happen, his love for Elise and sort of them being conspired against by by life. It's interesting that we get that commentary on and we get that opening for interpretation on mental health as well.
It's important. And again, rather than telling people what to feel, I'm showing them what to feel. I'm showing the consequences of someone who has gone through so many difficult things in his very short life. Like that does affect you. There are
Yeah.
consequences to these things. And he still gets up every day and still lives life, but it has affected him. And I wanted to also physically manifest the pain and trauma that the characters have gone through on Tomas with what happens to him in the end of the movie. I mean,
Yeah.
it can't all be internalized. You also have to physically show the consequences of these things. And that's why that scene was an important scene for me to showcase that. And also talking about the war, that war affects people,
Yeah.
regardless of whoever is fighting, regardless of whoever wins or loses. It's people who ultimately suffer. And what does that mean? So that's what I tried to explore at the end of the film specifically.
Yeah, that the scene where Tomas's arm gets ripped off was I did not see that coming, and it was so gut wrenching. So it was incredible to see in the film.
I wanted the film to progressively not get darker, but just become more mature as the characters got older. So kind of mirroring their, um, I would say, not personality, but mirroring their experiences. And then towards the end of the film, yeah, that was a harsh moment, but I needed to show that moment because when war strikes, when these conflicts happen, things change in a flash, and you don't have a build up towards those things. Your life changes in a flash, and that was important to kind of put that in and then show the brutality of it. And hopefully, if I did my job right, you are attached to the character by that moment, so it
Yeah.
hurts more. But then to subvert expectations, and he doesn't hold it against Vincent because Vincent's actions were also his doing as well. He maybe coddled him a little too much, maybe didn't allow him to explore the things he wanted to explore, not in a strict manner, but just through his sheer force of personality that did affect his son at the end of the day. And so I think him also realizing that and still going up to him in the end of the movie and putting his hand on his shoulder as his sleeve was
Yeah.
flapping and to show that their bond could endure something like that, and their
Yeah.
love for each other was so strong that it endured all this horrific thing that they both went through, and they both have suffered together. So it was important to put that in.
Yeah. There's a strength in the sadness, which is, I think, really hard to convey that you guys did very well. You know, yeah, it's really beautiful. Um, at the end of the documentary, David Friedman, he kind of compares The Glassworker to Gone with the Wind. I wonder what you think of that. I used to love that movie as a
Yeah.
kid, Gone with the Wind. It's also beautiful and dark, but I just wonder what you think of that comparison.
I was very honored that he would utter the glass worker in the same sentence as Gone with the Wind. That wasn't intentional. I'm glad he saw that. My biggest live action inspiration behind the film was Dr. Zhivago. So Gone with the Wind and Dr. Zhivago aren't very similar, but like thematically they're pretty similar. And I would say a lot of the visuals from Dr. Zhivago, especially on the train as they're leaving, all of those things I tried to do a callback to in the Glassworker with Alliz as well. But regarding what David said, I was just very honored that he felt that.
Yeah. Samim, do you want to talk a little bit about the music?
Yeah, I was going to say, I really enjoyed you wrapping up the movie with that climatic scene that we spoke about. But what really resonated with me within that scene was Aliz's growth as a musician. And I believe you wrote the score of the final sort of scenes where Alliz is performing the solo, which is beautiful, by the way, like just isolated within itself. The violin was truly awe-inspiring. It's one of the most beautiful instruments, in my view, in the world. But her growth as a musician, I didn't know that you were a musician when I watched the film the first time. And then once I did some research, I was just blown away that you were also a classically trained musician. And for the listeners, when you're watching this film, pay close attention to the music because it is just so beautiful. And it's an integral part of the movie, particularly the end, the way that it sums up with the climactic scene and the music that comes about. How do you, is that two brains, Usman? Like, is there a music part of it while you're coming up with the story? I know you storyboarded, I think you said 2,700 pictures or 2,700 drawings. So like, does the music come after?
Thank you so much. For me, it's all the same thing. whether I'm drawing or whether I'm writing music. They all come, I would say that they overlap, because initially when I started the idea for this movie, I drew what are called image boards, which are isolated potential scenes of what could happen in the movie. So while I was drawing those, I had my desk, and this is before I drew digitally. I would just draw on paper, and I was painting the image boards. I would draw and then turn around when my upright piano would be in my room. So I'd have that behind me, and I'd write a piece of music. The main motifs used throughout the film were things I wrote very, very early on while I was image boarding the movie. The main theme for the Glassworkers, which is this piece in D minor, um, that came very early on, and I would write a piece of music that would kind of go off in another direction, and then I would turn around and draw another image board inspired by that music. So I mean, I'm not able to separate the two, but I'm very, very grateful that like while I was making the film, obviously I had a lot of responsibilities, and I could not score the entire thing. So I asked one of my friends from Berklee College of Music to be co-composer on the project, and he did a brilliant job there. He took a lot of the motifs that I wrote and scored the picture, but then also I'd left a lot of gaps in places. So he kind of came up with a few motifs as well. And then we would have wonderful meetings where I would sit on Zoom, and he would share his screen with me, and we would go over the sheet music together and make tweaks here and there. He would look at one of my pieces and say, I think we should change it like this. Or I would look at one of his pieces and I'd be like, let's change some of the notes here. And specifically for Alliz's violin performance, there was a
Mhm.
lot of back and forth there. He had written a slightly more complicated, um, I would say, line for the opening, which is how many notes it is. So 4 notes is what we ultimately decided on. I think he had like a few more with some trills and things in there, and I was like, no, this opening has to be very simple. And we introduced the idea, and there's this wonderful description of a piece of music being described by Salieri in Amadeus, where he's like a rusty squeeze box. It
Yeah.
starts filling in with all these other instruments and becoming more and more layered. That's the kind of mentality I was approaching the violin piece like, that it should slowly, like a rusty squeeze box, just start expanding and then become the statement that it is for the character, because it's also her first piece of music. It has to have some naivety and not an amateur quality, but inexperience in it. So that's where the motif really came from. And I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yes.
Yeah, if there's a soundtrack that you will release, that's I'm going to purchase it.
The
And
soundtrack is on Apple Music and
yeah,
Spotify, so you can enjoy it.
Oh, great.
great.
What?
Yeah.
I got the name of Alliz's piece. What is wrong with me?
It's just so interesting the amount of sort of conceptual backstory there are to the choices on all of these things. It's really, really amazing. And even though obviously as a watcher, a listener, you don't know it all, you get the right sense of it, which is amazing.
Thank you. Sea of Dreams. That's what Alliz's piece is
Sea of
called.
Dreams.
Sea of
Sea of
Yeah.
Dreams.
Dreams.
Okay.
And
Right.
regarding all of the tech, so you have to have a lot of thought put into all of the decisions, like to justify everything that is happening on screen and to make sure that it makes sense. But then also you have to step away from that and just let it flow. So there was a lot of that. A lot of thought went into each and every decision, but then I certainly stepped away and was like, now it just has to work. And like even when I was animating shots, we put a lot of theoretical and technical understanding into how I would achieve a shot, like the motion that I'm drawing, all of those things. But then you have to be like, but is it working? Is it moving correctly? Is it evoking the feeling that you want it to evoke? And then you just have to let it breathe. So the whole film's process was like that. A lot of thought went into every decision, and then it just has to work on its own, and you just have to execute it. So I can talk about all these things, but if it didn't work in the finished product, then it doesn't really matter. So um yeah, a lot of thinking followed by uh just executing.
It absolutely worked.
Yeah.
There's no worries there. So
Yeah.
the final film, on a personal note, it's sort of, it doesn't remind me specifically of the story or anything like that, but this is a love story. When I watched Nightmare Before Christmas, like 30 years ago, at the end of the movie, Jack and Sally share a kiss, and he wasn't aware that Sally might be in love with him. And my daughter and I just went to Disneyland last week on New Year's Day, and Haunted Mansion there is outfitted with Jack and Sally and Nightmare Before Christmas. And I don't know if you've been to Disneyland, but you've probably seen the pictures and stuff. They outfit it with that movie. And something in the beginning of the episode you said was you wanted to create like little Easter eggs, find things, people expand on the story, they expand on the characters. And I feel like that's what's happened with a movie such as Nightmare Before Christmas after all these years. And who knows, 30 years from now, the Glassworker would probably still be finding Easter eggs. And my favorite one is the rose itself. Like,
Yeah.
it's just such a consistent theme throughout the movie. It's beautiful. Vincent put his entire heart into it to give to Alliz, and it's just, if that was on the merch shop, we bought some sweatshirts and stuff. Hey, everybody, but I would buy that glass rose, right, Shubnam? It was amazing.
Yeah, the glass rose, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so perfect because it's, obviously a red rose is a symbol of love. And then the fact that he makes it so beautifully as a kid, but he feels like it's not good enough, and that's just, again, like all these little Easter eggs, like you're saying, it's just so beautiful and they work so perfectly together.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. It means a lot to hear that all the work art that went into everything is moving people. So I'm very grateful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. But we wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little about Mono Animation Studios. I know you're getting a lot of press out there. I should also say, I didn't say it in the beginning of the episode, but The Glassworker is Pakistan's official entry for nominations for Oscars, which should be announced January 19th. I think there's a couple-day delay now. So just for the listeners out there, this film is on everyone's radar, and it is Pakistan's official entry into the Oscars. So quite an achievement. But what's next for
Congratulations.
Mono Animation Studios? I know there's probably a lot on your plate, but I don't know what you can say about future projects, but if there's anything out there, like, yeah.
So regarding the submission to the Oscars, that is something that never in my wildest dreams would happen, because we're an
Amazing.
animated movie. So that when Mo Naqvi and the Pakistan selection committee informed us that the Glassworker will be chosen to represent Pakistan at the Oscars, that was a huge honor, and I was humbled by that and just stunned. But like, just to be part of this conversation, I think is a huge honor, because there's so many amazing movies that are made every year. To be part of that conversation as one of the good films to be made in the world of cinema, that is something I never ever thought would happen, and I'm just in awe and just filled with gratitude. I joke with all of the journalists that I talk to regarding the nominations that I'm not even the underdog in this race. I'm the flea that lives on the underdog. We're up against literal giants, but I'm just grateful to be here and learning everything that I can, and we'll see what happens. And what's next? Whenever I think about the next project, this one took me 10 years. This is the 11th year of me talking about this movie. So I'm doing this a very, very long time. Whenever I think about the next project, my heart says yes, but my mind says no. I'm just waiting and my mind to be realigned. And as I said earlier, it's a miracle making one movie. This was extraordinarily difficult, and a lot of things went our way to be able to achieve this the way we made this movie. So if I'm ever blessed with the opportunity to make another one, I will obviously happily jump back in, but also learn from this experience and try to do it better. And if I have the next film ready, I have the next story ready, I have the next set of image boards that I was describing, I have those ready. So I'm just waiting for the right moment, and then I'll have to do this all over again.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really, really amazing. We are eagerly looking forward to learning about your next idea whenever you're able to share it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll share the idea now. I want to explore a lot of the things that we saw in the Glassworker, such as the mythology and all of the like jinns and those things. Just aspects of our folklore and mythology is definitely what I have planned next.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Great.
That's exciting.
Well, we're fans and we'll be anxiously awaiting some news
Yeah.
on next projects. But in the meantime, everybody, please check out the Glassworker. There are screenings. Please follow on Instagram. It's quite a following. Usman is regularly posting potential screenings in the United States. Usman, thank you so much. This has been a
Thank
riveting
you.
conversation. We really, really appreciate you joining Chai After Dark, our small podcast. It's been truly, truly a blessing to talk to you. Thank you so much, Usman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then thank you for your questions. They were some of the most interesting questions I've ever been asked. So,
Oh, wow. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Wow. We're somewhat new to this, but we love like animation itself is just growing up in Silicon Valley. Like when Toy Story came out, it just like kind of changed. I know that's
Yeah.
3D and it's not something that you're doing. And I want to make that distinction here too. This is a 2D film. And for the people that are interested in Pixar, Soul, Toy Story 1, 2, 3, those are 3D. So it's quite a different process here. I encourage everyone to watch the documentary to find out why Usman went the 2D route. It's quite fascinating, actually. And the trips you took to Japan, we didn't even touch on. So again, thank you so much. I wish you nothing but more success.
Yeah.
We'll be eagerly awaiting more news from you and Mono Animation Studios. Thank you so much.
Congratulations on everything you've done so far. And, like Sameem said, best wishes for a bright future.
thank you so much. Inshallah. Thank you.
Inshallah.
Thank you so much, Chai listeners, for listening to our conversation with Usman Riaz. If you would like to learn more about the Glassworker, please check out theglassworker.com, or you can find The Making of the Glassworker, a YouTube documentary which details every aspect of what we discussed today. I will link that in the description. Please check out our Midnight Chai Society on Patreon or Substack. Coming soon, Shabnam and I discuss current events. To find out more about Chai After Dark, please visit us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Blue Sky. Please rate us 5 stars. So far, so good. Spotify, Apple. Or if you'd like to send us an email, chaiafterdark@chaiafterdark.com. We always respond. Thank you so much, everyone. Talk to you soon.